Deirdre Kinahan is an incredibly successful and well-known playwright, especially in an Irish context. Some of you might not know her work so well, but if you've done your homework, you can read a nice biography of her in the conference programme. And I think we're going to have lots of things to talk about, so I don't want to fill up the time with rereading the biography in the programme. The other thing I just learned in the last session when Dee texted me was that, to our surprise, the Czech production of Rathmines Road, which was first on in Ostrava not so long ago, was being performed in a theatre in Prague last night, and we didn't know. So apologies, the director is here with us, so maybe you will pitch into our conversation later. So apologies that we didn't know, but now we do. But it is a good sign. Deirdre Kinahan is everywhere. She's in Ostrava and she's going to be in Mainz, and there's all sorts of work going on all over the place. So nice start to our conversation. So we have an idea that we'd like to block things in a few sections. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. And then Dee was kind enough to say she'd do readings from 2 different works that we might talk about. And again, I've put some photographs and the covers of those works on the PowerPoint, so I'll switch to those as we approach them. So you get a bit of a flavour of the work as well. I'm going to sit down, I think, since talking, standing up to someone sitting down is a bit peculiar. So maybe for people who perhaps don't know your story so well, could we begin with the obvious stuff about how you got into theatre and your work so far?
So far.
Shall I
Sure.
do that?
Thank you very much, and lovely to be here. Yeah, well, I suppose a little bit like Louise Lowe, who was your speaker yesterday, I didn't quite come through the traditional routes. I didn't study theatre. I was just a theatre lover. I went to plays with my mother from the time I was about 7 or 8 years old. And in a way, I realised that was my theatre education, because you were going to the Abbey and you were seeing all the classic Irish dramas, the Gate, you were seeing all the classic British dramas. And then there was a great little theatre called The Focus. And I used to go and see a lot of American plays there. And then the Project Arts Centre, a lot of new writing. So I just grew up, you know, goggle-eyed, jaw around my knees, you know, entering in and out of these incredible worlds, and just fell in love with it. So I went to university and I did a degree in English and history, and then I went off travelling for a while. And when I came back, I decided I really want to do this. How do you do it, you know? And I set up a theatre company with a good friend of mine. So basically that meant we put £400 into a bank account and did a play above a pub in Dublin called Lettuce and Lovage by Peter Schaefer, where we played Lettuce and Lovage because I wanted to be an actor at the time. So that's how we started. And then we did some Beckett and we did some Albee, and I was really interested in kind of contemporary writing and really interested in women. And I began to realise that there were very few plays being done by female playwrights, and that there was a real dearth of work by women writers. So in the 90s in Dublin, it was a very active scene. There was a lot of small theatre companies being set up. We didn't realise it, but it was a bit of a golden period, and they all had their own mission statement. It might be new writing, it might be Commedia dell'arte, it might be international new works, you know, or like Louise's company, you know, kind of, I know the word isn't site specific, but you know, that kind of off-site theatre. So it was a great time to start making theatre. But as an actress, like everybody else, I also did a little bit of work on the side, and I was working with an organisation called Ruhama Women's Project. And that was an organisation that supported women who worked in prostitution in Dublin. And those fabulous ladies used to come and see me in my plays. And then one of them said, "You should write a play about us." And I was going, that's a brilliant idea, but I'm not a writer. I'll get a writer in. Got a lovely guy called Jerry Morgan, a friend of his is here in the audience today, to come and help me write this play, Bécarna, Women of the Flesh, which was a play about 5 women working in prostitution in Dublin. But it wasn't about their lives as prostitutes, it was about their lives as women, sisters, mothers, lovers, daughters, and how that was impacted by society's response to the profession of prostitution. So that was the first play I wrote, and it was kind of well received, and it was taken to the Edinburgh Fringe, and it trotted about a bit, and I just went, oh, maybe I can do this. And, like a series of events, really, a lot of women who ran theatres. When I look back now, people like Brie Jukes in the Civic Theatre and Pat Moylan in Andrews Lane began to commission me to write plays. I had my own theatre company, but we would co-produce with them. So I just started on this journey. So once I started writing, I couldn't be stopped. So I think I've written about 40 plays. I don't know, like short ones, long ones, fat ones, thin ones, It's just what I do.
Okay. I'm going to let you keep the microphone. I can shout out a good loud voice. So these short plays, I can see the first one you mentioned, they're collected in that 5 plays that's published by Nick Hearn, I think?
That's right, yeah.
And so do the other works that are in that short works, are they speaking to the same collective or the same, or are they all different?
They're all quite different. I mean, that was a lovely little publication that came out, I think maybe 3 years ago. I wrote a play called An Old Song Half Forgotten that was directed by Louise Lowe, who's here with us today. And that was probably one of the most important and moving and special writing moments of my life, because I wrote the play for a man called Brian Murray, who was one of Ireland's most loved actors, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He was performing in my play Halcyon Days that was on tour, and he received this diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and he was devastated, and he met with me to say he had to drop out of the cast and that he thought he would never act again. And I remember just thinking, what is that like? It's like a pianist losing the use of their fingers. And I said, yes, you will, Brian. I'll write you a play that you can act in. So sometimes be careful what you say, because then I had to go and do it. And not only go and do it, but get a production of it within 12 months, because Alzheimer's, as you know, is a disease that eats away at somebody very quickly. So anyway, I wrote that play, An Old Song Half Forgotten, and I wrote it as, I wrote a play for, Brian was a character actor, so I created this character, but a man who had a life very similar to his, an actor in a nursing home. And the conceit was that the actor is listening to a string quartet, and the pieces of music bring up memories of his past. And I knew Brian needed to be kind of scaffolded on stage, so I created a younger version of himself. So there were 2 actors in a string quartet, and the younger man kind of acted out all the characters from his past. And it meant that Brian, who literally did not know what day of the week it was or what in the name of God he was doing in the Peacock Theatre, could just kind of sit into a world he knew really well, which was the stage and actors. And even though he was in full-blown Alzheimer's, and myself and the director probably lost about a stone each as we grew nearer and nearer to production, once those curtains opened and once the lights came on, all his actor instincts kicked in, and he put in a performance that if you did not know he had Alzheimer's, you wouldn't know. And we had somebody speak, deliver his lines into his ear. And it was incredible. And when Nick was publishing that, we had a conversation, and he knew a lot of my back canon, that had plays that had existed before Nick started publishing my work in 2010. So he said, we'll do a collection of shorts. So I suppose they speak to each other in a way that I suppose people, when they write about my work or talk about my work, they say that it kind of comes in from the corners of society and kind of outside. And it's like these very, very detailed little kind of moving pictures of lives that often exist in the shadows. So, I don't know if that's how I speak about my work, but it's how a lot of other people do. I mean, you learn a lot about yourself as a writer from other people and from people like you who write about the work, you know, because I'm a very instinctive writer. I didn't train. I know how to tell stories. I know characters, and I'm kind of deeply political, so everything kind of comes out of whatever the hell is going on in the world or in society and culture at that time. But I don't think too much about it. I just get in and start writing it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a beautiful story about that the play. I've read about it and I didn't get to see it, but to have a play about Alzheimer's and with someone who is suffering from it, and that timeline is really tricky, and it is something that we've been talking about a lot here, about resilience of care and where theatre falls in. I found this great quote about your writing, and that connects with that it's described as in celebration of the humanity, dignity and resilience of women. This was a piece about gender. But not just women, obviously, as we discuss this. So when you think about the topic of resilience, since that's what we're speaking about, is that a preoccupation of yours? Because I can see it in lots of your work that ultimately that is one of the themes.
That is one of the themes. Yeah, I suppose again, it was never conscious. But I think because my mother worked with homeless kids, and I worked then with Ruhama for a period of time. And my husband is a social worker, and he worked a lot in Merchants Quay drug addiction unit. In my formative years, teenager, early 20s, I was surrounded by the lives of people that were not in any way as kind of privileged as I was. And when I mean privileged, I don't mean financially, I just mean love and stability. And I kind of realized very quickly that we all walk the same streets and we all might exist in the same time zone, but we can live very, very different lives. And I couldn't help but try and understand that. And for me, playwriting is always about questions. It's always about trying to understand why people behave the way they do, live the way they do the things they do. It's like I'm this kind of watcher from the outside, trying to just understand humanity. And I mean, I've had my fair share of hurt and trauma myself, who gets to 57 without it. But I realize that, you know, people are extraordinary and they come through sometimes the most extraordinary battles. And I wonder sometimes how they get up and they stand in the world or watch a butterfly or eat a boiled egg or enjoy a pint of Guinness, do you know, when you know what's happened or what, but I think that's what people do. So I think resilience is just a really key part of what it is to be a human being.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing is that you're deeply interested in characters and stories.
Absolutely.
What about the forms? Like, how do you've got these powerful stories and characters, but how do you choose the form you ultimately put them in, or where do you arrive with that?
Where do I arrive with that? Well, form and structure is actually something I never think about. I know, shock, horror. I mean, plays come at me in different ways. It's either a story, like we say, we're going to talk about the Saviour. I hear a story about a woman who meets a man in a prayer group and gets involved in a relationship with somebody. And that story strikes me as incredible for a suite of reasons. So I'll go in and think about how that could be a play. What room will I put her in? How will I unlock that story? Why am I so interested in it? What are the themes of it? That's one way a play will come at me. But another way a play will come at me is I might see two men dance and just be absolutely intoxicated by that moment between them and want to write a play that was hue and cry that brings us to that point where two men dance. So plays come at me in many different ways, and then I get a lot of commissions. I mean, I really have only written to commission, very spoiled, for about the last 10 or 15 years. And sometimes they are direct commissions. You know, I have a play opening in Mainz the week after next. That is a commission where I was asked to write a play about a group of refugees, German refugees who came to Ireland in the 18th century. Or like Louise, I was very busy during the period of commemorations writing plays about our revolution, the Irish Revolution against the English, and then our own civil war and how we turned on each other. So plays come at me in different ways. And to get back to your question about form is, once I get a story in my head or an idea or a question, like there's one play that you had a picture of up there spinning, and that I wanted to understand. There was a crash in Ireland, a terrible crash, economic crash, and there was a plethora of infanticides where men just lost it and murdered their own children, sometimes committing suicide as well, and one or two women in, around 2010, 2011. And I was thinking, Jesus, what's under that? How does that happen? So that was a big question for me. So I went off reading around it, researching it, and then created a story of a man who does just that. And of course, that man just wanted to be in control of his life. He had a picture of what his life was going to be, what his world was, how everything was going to turn out. And when it started to go off the rails and his wife left him and he lost access to his child, then his way of taking back control was this crazy idea of killing himself and his child. So plays come at me in different ways. And I think the form and the structure is just like, how are you going to crack open that nut? How are you going to explore these themes? How are you going to tell that story? The form arrives when I start writing. So I usually just take up the pen and start writing a scene, and then let that scene go wherever it's going, and then write the next scene and the next scene. And then I might go, okay, well, I put them all in one room. Will it stay this way? You know, is somebody going to walk in that we don't expect? And I just let it evolve. And I suppose I'm 30 years at it now, so I kind of know what I'm doing. So I'm very happy to just let it fly and then maybe corral it a bit.
Mm-hmm. So when you're working on commission, is time a matter of pressure or crisis with that?
No, I don't really do crisis. Yeah, no. No, there's enough crisis in the world without me adding to it. No, I love commissions and I like deadlines and I just go at it and I mean, some plays you're right in two years, you know. I got a commission last year for a play that's going to be on next summer. And now what's crazy, because I'm trying to write it in between of a suite of productions, because I've got 4 premieres this year. But that's great. I like to be at something when other plays are going on. But yeah, no, I work to deadlines, usually do about 6 or 7 drafts. And then you have your passion projects. Like I have a lovely passion project called The Homecoming of Joseph Grace, which is a play that's been in my head and heart for about 10 years. Story of a man who left Ireland in 1914 and joined the British Army and became a prisoner of war in Germany, and then ended up a rent boy in Weimar, Berlin, and then it's just this kind of fabulous story based on fact. Around an unknown little mob in Irish history called the Irish Brigade, who were trained by the German army during the First World War to come over and assist the Irish rebels at home. But anyway, it all went pear-shaped and it never happened. And I always thought, what happened to them? So I created a story of this guy, Joseph Grace. And it was supposed to be done during the commemoration, but then it fell apart with COVID. But myself and the lovely Louise have managed to get a production together. So it's going to open next week in Cork.
I have a picture at the end.
So sometimes passion projects where I beg, borrow and steal the money myself.
Okay.
I used to be a producer too, so watch out.
Valuable skills. So we are moving towards a little bit of a reading and discussion of a couple of works. The first is this play called The Saviour that you already mentioned a little bit about. That was on during lockdown. I think just before.
Just after, wasn't it? 2023. It was filmed first during COVID. First. That's right, in 21.
So that's fair. So this play is a really striking one, quite an intimate play, but it excavates a lot of public trauma and material, and has some fantastic performers, at least in the first production. It's been remounted, I can see from the pictures on
many times,
as well.
yeah.
So it's quite popular, and it asks lots of difficult questions about the past and responsibility and forgiveness and what we do with that past now. Would you like to read a bit of it first, or
Sure.
what way would you like to do this?
Yeah, I'll read a little bit, and then we can come back and chat about it. No bother.
Great.
Okay. So this is Maura. Maura is sitting up in the bed smoking. She is 67 and she is enjoying the cigarette. So am I gone to the dogs altogether at the end? Or is this right? I wonder, will you tell me, Jesus? I don't know your mind anymore, but I am enjoying the fag. Yes, I am enjoying the fag. And the sex, which was a surprise, I can tell you, because sex has always been a matter of mechanics for me. But you know that, don't you, Jesus? You've been with me long enough. Sex has always been a means to the end, foisted on me when I didn't want it, or offered up for a bit of peace. But this was different, wasn't it? This was, what would you say? What would you say, Jesus? Or did you scarp her? Did you boot when we got to the dirty bit? No doubt you did. No doubt you headed off somewhere a lot purer, like Patrick or Medjugorje or Tibet. I always think it must be nice and pure up there in Tibet, up in the highlands where the white mountain tops touch the clouds and ne'er a human, ne'er a sinner in sight. That must be a relief. That must be a nice break for you, Jesus, where you can just sit yourself down and have a breather and look at all the beauty your Father created and not be being bothered by world wars or mass murders or screaming owl ones having sex. And much healthier with all that clean air. I'll tell you, I'm glad you got out. I'm glad you headed off. You should have headed off. And not be caught up in this bedroom, in this bed, with the heaving and shunting that was me and Martin. Martin, oh, even the sound of his name feels delicious. Marcin, strong and sudden, isn't it? Like a shock, penetrating. No, get a grip on yourself, Moira Sullivan. I can hear you say that, Jesus, and you're right. Do you know you're right? I'm acting ridiculous at my age. And he down there, Martin, down in my kitchen, making me coffee. Coffee? Honest to God,
He makes me feel like a movie star. I mean, Colin never made me coffee when he was alive. I don't even like coffee. But I didn't want to say that to Martin. I didn't want to spoil the moment. I hope you're not getting all jealous now. Are you, Jesus? I hope you're not getting all disappointed in me, because I haven't quite worked out if it's a sin. If this is a sin. Because I know the rules. Dear God, don't I know the rules around copulation? Sure, they were beaten into me from the time I could walk, but because Martin came to me through you. I'm guessing this might be part of the plan. A form of evangelizing, perhaps. So don't be worrying. You'll always be my one and only. You'll always be my first. You know that. Martin is only number 4. That's right, isn't it? Number 4, because there was you, then there was that uncle used to bother me when I was a child. Colin for 42 years and now him. Marcin. I know the nuns only let one in. I know the nuns keep themselves just for you, and maybe they're right. Sure, haven't they enough to be doing just to keep you happy? Let alone letting the others in, for their pickings.
So this play isn't a monologue, but there's a big part of it that is a monologue, as we've heard this beautiful speech with Maura in conversation with Jesus, who doesn't do a lot of answering back.
No.
So
Jesus has done a runner.
it's not answering. And it is a scene that somehow speaks to other scenes in Irish theatre. Maybe was that on your mind, and could you explain?
I suppose, even Marie Mullen, who is one of our most beloved actresses, says, anytime somebody wants an L1 in a bed, they always go looking for Marie Mullen. We've had a few L1s in beds over the years, plays like Valia Gongora, brilliant plays, and Woman in Scarecrow, I think she's in a bed as well, But no, that's not really where it came from. I mean, it is based on a true story. And while it isn't a monologue, neither is it a comedy. It actually gets darker and darker and darker when we realise the truth of Moira's life. And I suppose linking into the conversation you had yesterday, we have a terrible history in Ireland of institutional abuse, where a lot of women were incarcerated in Magdalene institutions, and for becoming pregnant, or just being too sexy, or being obstinate, or families just wanting to get rid of them. So women were quite brutalised in Ireland, because we had a very deeply conservative Catholic kind of caliphate all of our own. So the residue of that is still with us. Even while I live a great life floating around Prague and New York and, living a life of great liberty, I was brought up in the 70s when, there was a bar on women in the workplace. And there were, no contraception, no divorce, no abortion, very little financial independence. Like, it was a tough place to be a woman. So Maura is one of those people who was made by that Ireland, and she's deeply religious. She clings to it. She's deeply traumatized. She spent some time in a Magdalene laundry herself, and she's deeply homophobic and kind of right-wing conservative in her thinking. So she represents, a small residue of people in Ireland who in a way have kind of lost a war, because Ireland has become a very socially progressive place. But that's really tough on them, because they feel a little bit lost within it. And I suppose when I heard the story about this woman, and it is based on a true story, who got in a relationship with a man who turned out to be a notorious paedophile. But of course he hid behind the crucifix, as an awful lot of them do. She meets him in a prayer group. She tells herself that it's not true. Then when she's confronted with the reality, she tells herself that she forgives him. And like the story of the play is that her son calls for her birthday and has to break the news to her. And so the first half is Maura kind of monologuing us, giving us a sense of her history and her story. And then her son comes in and he just blows it up. And that second half, that scene, it starts off very funny, but it gets darker and darker. And, you know, sometimes as a playwright, you've got to pen some words and phrases and notions and ideas that you deeply hate. But if you're trying to get in and understand people who don't think like you, it's kind of part of the job.
Yes, I was really struck. One detail that mightn't be obvious to people who don't know this play is that the character Maura has 3 adult children, and the son who comes to visit her is married to his partner, and she releases this horrible torrent of abuse on him in reaction to the news. So there's this clash of different generations and perspectives and worldviews inside the family conflict, even though he is attempting to warn her of the hazards of this relationship that she's entering into. So it distills these multi-level conflicts.
Huge themes. I mean, religiosity, Jesus help us, you know, like in Ireland, we're only coming out the other side, do you know? And now you're looking at the world and you're looking what's going on in the White House in America and, you know, all over the world, you know, in Gaza and you're just going, you know, this, you know, I'm on a crusade for God. It only ends up in one place, and that place is a dark, dark place. So you kind of feel, you know, as an Irish playwright kind of writing out of this, you know, we know what it's like when you live under that kind of indoctrination, and it's not a pleasant place to be. You know, so that was very much in my head. And it was funny because Louise also directed The Saviour, and I think I wrote it in about 2019, 2020, and it was just after Ireland had voted in gay marriage and had voted in abortion. And I remember Louise kind of saying, I thought you were mad. Like, I thought the Moras were gone. They were dead in the water. And I said, no, they're only waiting in the long grass. And now there's a couple of Moras with their Gucci handbag standing out in front of the electorate kind of going, let's bring us all back to family in Christ and marriage. And you're just kind of going, no thanks, you know?
Yeah, it's easy to take those battles as one, and it turns out in a very short time they might not be. So this play is quite striking in the way it distills those clashes between different partners, because they are members of the same family, the same country. They've all experienced bad things, but then they're fighting against each other for their idea of the world and what it is to be free. And I was very struck by how Maura would rather forgive someone who seems to be a paedophile than to give her own son credit. She's willing to sort of banish him and attack
Well, I mean,
him.
what she says is at least Martin gets down on his knees and asks for forgiveness, but because her gay son won't apologise for being gay, she will not forgive him. So it's just a dreadful conflation of the two things. But it all, like, I didn't make any of this up. Like, you know, you read kind of Catholicism and I mean, I know plenty of people who have a faith, and that whatever that faith is, and they live very quietly with it, and it bolsters them, and they are decent people who just bring love into the world. The people I have a problem with are those who use faith and use religion to try and control the rest of us and try and put themselves in positions of power. And you know, it's been there since the dawn of time.
So we're going to move on to a play that would give a little bit of sense of another dimension to your work in terms of cast size, even to talk a little bit about your adaptation that became The Unmanageable Sisters. So this play, The Unmanageable Sisters, is an adaptation of Michel Tremblay's work, which is not, the choice of your title for it actually is very leading as well. So maybe we start by explaining The Unmanageable Sisters as a title for Tremblay's play.
That play was a gift in the dark for me, really. I was asked by the Abbey to do kind of an Irish Dublin version of Les Belles Sœurs, which is a really famous Canadian play written in joual, which is the kind of Canadian French. But I had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I was going through cancer at the time. So I was in a very hellish place. So to be given a stage and 15 women and an amazing story about how women survive, the kind of pressures that are coded within our culture and society. It was just a really, really incredible experience. Les Belles Sœurs, it has been translated. I know there's a German version, there's a very famous Scottish version. It's been translated into many languages, and it's a play about 15 women. It was written by Michel Tremblay when he was only in his 20s, and it's set in a block of flats in Montreal. And one of the women has had a big win. She's won a load of Green Shield stamps, and you paste them into books, and you get things like new showers or a new stool or whatever. It was all the rage in the 70s around the world and in Ireland. But it's just a means to get a whole load of women together and tell their stories. That's what Tremblay was at. So when I was asked to do it, I read the play in English twice, and initially I found it quite dead on the page, and then the second time I read it, I found a kind of a rage within those women that I could connect with, and at that point I said I would do it, and the director said to me, the name Les Belles Sœurs is a very particular, it's not the sister-in-law, it's a very particular phrase in joual that kind of says a lot about women's relationships as well as the kind of familial position of them. So he said, what you call it is going to be very important. So anyway, I began to read these women, and they were all stuck at home in a block of flats, not working, at the behest of their husbands, their uncles, their sons, their grandfathers. They were cooking, cleaning 24 hours a day. They had very little money and very little liberty or opportunity in their lives, but they were really bloody funny and really clever and really talented. And there was some great tragedy about these women's lives being wasted in that way. And so I thought, I'll bring it to Ireland and I'll put it in a block of flats in Ballymun, because that was the seminal kind of development in Ireland of kind of flat living in the 60s. It was, each tower was named after an Irish revolutionary, and it was very much part of our story as a nation, housing our people and moving forward. But then the other side of that story was that women were kind of pushed back into the kitchens and expected to play a particular role in it. So I love my history. I'd written a lot of plays out of, the Irish Revolution, and I've written a play out of the Spanish Civil War. I love history and what it can tell us about ourselves. But there was one phrase, one of our revolutionaries was a man called Eamon de Valera, who some of you may well have heard of, who became our Taoiseach for a number of years and president, and really his influence over the first kind of 50 years of the nation is beyond compare. And De Valera fought in 1916, but he didn't allow women into his position because he didn't think they should be part of the fighting, even though Cumann and women at the time were very involved in the revolution. They weren't just making sandwiches, they weren't just, creating little balls of bandages. They were actively involved. They were gun runners. They were, Louise can speak to it even more than I can, but they had a very active role in it. But De Valera, after the revolution, when it came to the Civil War, and he was doing interviews about his time with the revolutionaries, he said, the women, they were the most unmanageable revolutionaries of them all. So that's why I wanted to call my play The Unmanageable Sisters, because if it wasn't for that unmanageability and for that resilience and that resistance, we probably would not live in the country that we live in today. So I felt we owed a great debt to my mother's generation and the generation before that, who helped build a nation that had kind of betrayed them. Their ideals of an Irish Republic and the freedoms that would bring, they didn't materialise until very recently, and we're not there yet.
And De Valera's fingerprints are very much on pushing
Constitution.
women into a particular set of roles that aren't public roles, but supporting roles. So that's what's so interesting about this play, this huge cast of fantastic performers. And would you like to read it?
I'll do another little read. So this, Tremblay is an absolute genius, and I learned so much from him. He not only writes realistic scenes, but he also writes fabulous choruses where all the women speak together as one. And it's a really, really powerful a technique that he uses. And then at different times, the women come right out and step in front and address the audience and kind of give a lot of their inner thoughts and struggles while the action's playing out. And this lovely character, Dolly Snow, was played by another one of Ireland's most loved actresses, Rina O'Grady, who was in a very famous television series, Father Ted. I don't know if you know it, but everybody loved Rina, and she hadn't been on the Abbey. I don't think she'd ever acted in the Abbey until we gave her the role of Dolly Snow. So I'm no Rina, but anyway, here's a little bit of Dolly. I wish they wouldn't laugh at me like that. Mr. Simon doesn't laugh at me. Mr. Simon likes to hear me laugh. The first time I saw him, I'll admit, I thought he was as ugly as sin. He's not good looking in the usual way. So when he called to the flat one Thursday and said, "Would you like to take a look at me brushes?" I slammed the door in his face. My mother always told me never to let a man in the flat. I think that might have been what happened to her back in Wexford. So the only one who gets into my flat is the paper boy, because he's still too young to get any ideas. Well, about a month later, didn't Mr. Simon call back? And he was all red in the face because it was a hot day and the lift was broken and he was puffing and panting. So I let him come into the hallway and sit down in the cool of it. But then when he was inside, I got a bit scared. But then I thought, sure, I'm bigger than he is, and he's bald, and he wears very nice clothes, so maybe he isn't dangerous. And actually, he turned out not to be a bit dangerous, but quite the gentleman. Not that I've ever met too many gentlemen, but he is nice and very polite. So I bought 2 toilet brushes from him on that first day. And then he took out his catalogue, and there were lovely things in it for the bathroom. And I fancied this little peach soap holder with a white flower on it, but he didn't have one with him. So he said I could place an order. Me, Dolly Snow, placing an order. I felt very important. Ever since then,
He calls back to me once a fortnight. And sometimes I don't buy tins, but we just sit and have a cup of tea and a chat. And when he's talking, you kind of forget that he's ugly because he knows tins. He travels all around Dublin and out to Meath and Wicklow, and he's even been to Wexford, where I was born, and lived the first 10 years of my life. And he says Wexford is a grand county, and I think I'm in love with him. I know that might sound stupid, because I only see him for that hour once a fortnight, but I look forward to his visits. And I buy them fondant fancies from Mary's shop on the Slogue Road to go with the tea. And he loves the pink icing on them. And he licks his lips if a little bit of the sugary bit escapes. And I've never felt this way before. Never. I mean, men have never paid me too much attention. Never actually had a boyfriend because I was always busy with work and in the hospital and minding me mam, but he tells me all about his travels and the kind of people he meets. So one day, I bought a bit of lipstick in the chemist and I put it on. And now sometimes he tells me jokes or rude stories. And at first I was scarlet, to be honest, but sometimes they're very funny. And he says he loves the way I laugh. So I laugh for him. I laugh and laugh and laugh for him.
So clearly all these characters are survivors of some sort. They are resilient women with a lot of complaints. And there's a sort of solidarity, but not a solidarity among them. That's an interesting tension in the play.
Yeah.
They're not above attacking each other, or doing a bit of backstabbing or taking down.
Yeah, like
it's not a romantic female solidarity picture at all in the end.
No, it's not. And that's what attracted me about the original play, because there's a lot of misdirected anger in there and there's a lot of hurt. And it's a bit like, you know, that classic that we become our own prison guards, you know, because they are so deeply repressed that it's like the bullies in the schoolyard. Sometimes you side with the bully because if you're on the bully side, they're not going to pick on you. So there was women in there who, you know, suffered marital rape. Women who, one young girl is trying to get an abortion and she's no idea how she's going to manage it. You two other women who were brought up in a convent, like they all have their stories and they're all made by the kind of social restrictions they live in. So at times they love each other and their laughter is wonderful and their friendship is wonderful. But then they're also terrified of the bishops and the church, and it's like the flats have ears, and if you step out of line, it can be a very difficult place to live. So they also try and keep each other in check. Now, whereas Tremblay's is really, really dark and there is no hope, I did create one or two of the younger characters. I had one going to UCD and going to college and getting an education and determined to, you know, break out of that cycle of poverty in which she found herself. So, I mean, it was a tricky one because when you do an adaptation, what a lot of people don't realize is, like, Michel Tremblay is still alive and I had to send him every draft of the play. So we had to, you know, he had to agree. And like, talk about pressure, I think I was asked to do this in November and it was opening in March. So it was quite a wild ride. I had to write the first draft in about 3 weeks. It was crazy. But the good thing about that was I just read the play and read a number of versions and translations of the play. So I connected with the women I did not realise that it was basically Canada's Playboy of the Western World, one of their most important plays about language and politics. I knew none of that. So I just kind of got inside, as I used to say, the knickers and tights of those women and got to know who they were. And I wrote from out of there. And it was only afterwards I kind of realised, oh, Jesus, like there's all these Canadian academics and critics coming over to see this Irish version of their most famous, most beloved play. But I think that's what saved me, because if I had known all that, I might have forgotten the women. And actually one, Karen Fricker, who's an Irish Canadian, you probably know Karen. I remember she saying to me, Deirdre, you actually, all the productions I've seen of it all over the years, it's kind of almost been crucified by its own politics. And you put the women front and centre again. And I didn't tell her. It's because I didn't know. You know? Plow on.
I've one last little detail that I think is beautiful about your adaptation. I'm not sure how it works in the original Tremblay. At the end of the play, this picture is of the women singing out to the audience, and they're singing the national anthem and stamping their feet. It's quite aggressive. How did the Tremblay play end? Because this is a genius ending. Because the lyrics of the Irish anthem are quite problematic.
Soldiers of Destiny, yeah. Well, like, yeah, the genius is Mr. Tremblay, because his Les Belles Sœurs ends with the national anthem. And I suppose, like, he was kind of fighting a cause for kind of French culture and French language within the anglicised Canadian political and social time. So singing the national anthem, you know, was a political point. So when I put it in, because it was part of the original, I also thought, here we have 15 women singing our national anthem, the Irish national anthem. We're always seeing, you know, 15 footballers in GAA singing it. We're always seeing rugby players singing it. We're always seeing men singing it. It was written by a man. It kind of felt like it wasn't ours. And to see 15 of Ireland's finest actors belting it out on the National Theatre, when we had just had a theatrical revolution called Waken the Feminists, because we weren't being produced in our National Theatre and our stories weren't being told in our National Theatre. There was an awful lot under that act. But what I think has to be noted is that each one of those brilliant actresses, each said that when they sang that national anthem, they were singing it for some woman in their life that they knew was failed by Ireland. So it might have been a mother or an aunt. So when that intent is inside a performer, that intent reads.
It really projects.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think I wanted to just touch on the two productions that you mentioned are coming up very soon, just to share them. And there was another cover. The cover, it hasn't been published yet, so there isn't a definitive cover for any publication. But I came across Fishammel's image that's on their website. German colleagues, this is on in Mainz.
It is.
2 weeks, less than 2 weeks.
18th of June it opens.
So, and you already mentioned a tiny bit about the strange story behind this. Maybe just to synthesize that in very brief way, and how you found working with Staatstheater in Mainz and that collaboration. So
fantastic, yeah. Well, Staatstheater in Mainz translated and produced a play of mine, Rathmines Road, the same play that Jan translated and produced here in Czechia. And they did a brilliant job of it. And that girl at the front, Hannah with the long red hair, played the central role, Sandra, in the German production. And I went over to Mainz and met them all and saw the production and really loved them. And I knew Jorg for years, their dramaturg and artistic director, because he comes to Ireland a lot. He's a real fan of Irish theatre. So he asked me, would I write a play for them now, which was quite new. I don't think that they commission an awful lot of new writing. And he had this story about these Palatines, these Germans who had been brought over to Ireland. They were seeking refuge. They were fleeing the 100 Years' War. They were fleeing famine. But they were actually being brought into Ireland by Queen Anne and the English planters to Protestantize Ireland. So they were being brought in to kind of colonize. They were being plucked out of one war and into another, but they didn't kind of quite know that. So it's a very interesting history that he was asking me to write into. But I also thought, I have to make this talk to the present day, and obviously refugees, immigration, and people being pushed from one end of the world to the other is just one of the great themes of our time. And Ireland is no different. There's a lot of immigrants coming in. It's very new to us because we were always the immigrants going out. And there's quite a rise in, kind of racism and anti-immigrant feeling in Ireland, which I just find deeply disturbing as well as deeply ironic, considering, we wouldn't have survived if we weren't welcomed around the world. But anyway, so I created a story about a young Afghan boy who has arrived into Ireland right now, and there's an altercation, and he runs and he hides out in an old carriage shed in Limerick. And when the play opens, you just see him there. He's traumatized. He's lying in a corner, shaking. And this beautiful woman in peasant dress and long red hair comes out and starts to sing him a German hymn as she comforts him. And it is kind of through her, she's a ghost of one of the Palatines who came 300 years earlier. So through his story, you learn her story, and through her story, you learn his story. So it's been a beautiful write. And it's a co-production between Fishamble Theatre Company, who are a new writing company in Ireland, and Stat Theatre Minds. So it's been fascinating because, obviously there's a big repertory system. I mean, they've got their own orchestra, their own dance troupe. I mean, they've got resources like we couldn't dream about, And, but yet, as I always say, we can match them artistically any day of the week, and we all love working together. So it's half a German cast, half an Irish cast, directed by an Irish director, designed by a German designer. So it's a fabulous marriage, and we're all learning an awful lot about how we make theatre. But I'm actually going there tomorrow for the big dress rehearsal on Tuesday. There's rituals that are very, very different to how we work in Ireland, but wonderful. And it's just been fantastic. And so it opens in Germany, and then it comes to the Dublin Theatre Festival, and it goes to Limerick, where the county it's written out of, where the story comes from, and then it goes back to Germany again in October. So I've written it in English, and those poor German actors have learnt it in English. I mean, they're something else, And but it's been performed with German subtitles, and then I've written little bits of Irish into it, and Pashto and German, because obviously the Irish spoke Irish at the time, the Germans spoke German, and I wanted to say something about language and linguistics, and again how we all kind of communicate without them sometimes.
Excellent. And I just wanted to show the picture of the show that you said was so long in the making, since it's also coming up. Just as a finisher, I know that we're at the end of the time, but this is then the next piece.
Yes, Joseph Grace, he opens next week.
So lots of work filming. So if you're in Ireland and you have a bit of time and you can manage to get a ticket, which might be difficult, this would be well worth your attention to. So that sounds like an amazing story also.
It comes from truth. They nearly are. And there's two more in the autumn, Adrift and Exile, two other premieres.
You can't keep up with me.
I'll take a rest next year.
Okay, so how are we doing for a time? We have to allow a few comments and questions since you've given us a wonderful tour through the plays and your practice. So let me open it up to the floor for a couple of minutes at least, please. It's a sunny day. Yes, gosh.
Thank you very much. This was amazing to hear. You talk all your place. I already read this up as clear as possible. I have to preface this by saying that before turning 80 is a Catholic. I noticed that you work at college a lot, fast in particular. Last year when I went to a wedding, Parker's Irish stood up, went to take a community, and I was like, what are you doing? You haven't been to the confession. And that's when he told me, like, oh, don't, like, it would be weird not to go. So I tried to, like, question about it. He told me something very interesting that made me rethink the way I see Irish Catholicism. He was like, you were brought up Catholic, I was brought up Irishman. And then I started talking to his family about Catholicism in Ireland, and it occurred to me that this Irish Catholic, or this Irish version of Catholicism is but more personal, as though the Vatican structure didn't exist a lot of times. It's different than I remembered when I got when I was like. So I would ask you if you perceive this sort of separate version of Catholicism that is Irish Catholicism, and you work with a particular playwright. Because even this communication with Jesus that I saw or heard, that's not something I remember my family doing. We pray, you know. Because church asks you to, and it's very structured and everything. It's not that person. It's not direct. There's no direct link to God.
That's very interesting. Do you know? I don't know. I think we're a pretty unruly bunch, and it is in the Irish psyche to kind of bend and twist things to make them kind of work for you. Like, I think as a colonized people, you know, you were constantly running up against walls. Like, you know, in our country, we were not allowed to be educated. If we were Catholics, you were not allowed to own a horse. You were not allowed to be part of the professional classes. You didn't have a vote. You know, like the Irish, kind of native Irish people were deeply repressed and trodden on for 800 years. It's in all our songs and most of our literature. But Catholicism plays a very funny role in all of that, because what happened was the planters and the colonists were English, so they were Protestant. So their identity, the oppressor's identity and religion were wrapped up in each other. And our identity and religion became wrapped up in each other. And you weren't kind of a true Irish Republican unless you were Catholic. And it was a very dysfunctional, dangerous kind of amalgam. And ironically, because churches tend to support the victors and the wealthy, like the church sided with the English most of the time after the famine, and they didn't want their flock to be little revolutionaries, and they excommunicated a lot of our revolutionaries. But then when they saw which way the wind was blowing, and they saw that those revolutionaries are now going to be the people in charge, they kind of wrapped the crucifix in a green, white and orange flag. So it's, you know, like so Irish Catholicism is very much wrapped up with identity, and I suppose in that way it becomes deeply personal. I suppose that's and then of course it's in all my plays because it's just so much part of the culture, and like I'm such an agnostic, but yet like everybody in Ireland the whole time goes, oh Mother of God, oh Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Like it's in our vernacular, so people think we're very religious, but it's just another way of person, really, you know. So it's very much tied up with identity and history.
Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I've just got, thank you so much. I just got 4 things really stayed with me in how you describe your writing process. At the start you said, I don't know if it's just an image or an actual thing, where you said, oh yeah, Well, I start by picking up a pen, which is interesting about, even if you're writing longhand versus at a computer. So I was interested in that. Then you talked about the image of two men dancing, and that was such a starting point of an image. You talk about being instinctive, and you don't overthink. It's coming from somewhere that you described as instinct. And finally, you said twice, that character was made by that context. That it's the context that makes the character, that constructs the character. And each of those really made me think about the process of how they might originate those different elements within your approach to writing. So I just wondered about, do you write longhand? Does that help creative use as flow, or is that just a turn of phrase?
It's more a turn of phrase, but I always have notebooks with me. And I often jot down little, notes or speeches or moments or ideas. But when I actually sit down, page one, I do write on the computer. So you're rewriting and rewriting and rewriting as you go.
Is it an image? Is it often in pursuit of an image? Because it was so evocative the way you talked about the two men dancing in that early moment.
Yes, sometimes it's an image, like even with the homecoming of Joseph Grace, I mentioned to Louise, sometimes there's a moment in my head that's the play. And she was saying, what is the moment in Joseph? And I was just saying, in my head, all I could hear was run, rabbit, run. And I could see a little kid who was being bullied in like big boots and shorts, running through a field with a posse behind him, that if they caught him, they were going to split him. Now, that doesn't happen in the play, but the energy of that is in the play. So I'm not very visual. I am quite literal, if you know what I mean. I love designers and directors. I never try and direct my own work. It's not my talent. And I'm just agog at what they see or what they can bring. But of course, when you're writing, you have to create some kind of a world, some kind of even if it's a very liminal space like Refuge, I just put them in a green in front of that old broken down carriage house beside the old castle and river where the Palatines once lived. I have to have a world in my head. So it's just, plays, as I said, they just present in different ways. I remember once listening to a radio broadcast, and a woman had been found dead on Black Horse Avenue, which is a street in Dublin, and she was shoved into a suitcase. So she was found in a suitcase. And I remember hearing that and going, oh my God, how awful. Who was she? Who did that? What was her life? What were her dreams? And then a play begins. So it just, or sometimes it can be a character, And then what I do a lot, and I know it's drawing towards the end of the day, so I don't want to talk too much, but like one of those plays in shorts is a play called Bog Boy. And Bog Boy is a play about Bridget and Hughie and this relationship that develops between them. It's actually about terrorism, and it's about how in Southern Ireland we were deeply complicit in the war in Northern Ireland, but kind of pretended we weren't. But that character had appeared in an earlier play, Knocknashee, and I felt I hadn't given her full presence and her full story. So she came back in a play called Bog Boy. And even Joseph Grace, little atoms of him have appeared in other plays, but now this is him, this is his story. So some characters won't leave you alone.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
All right, I'm getting a gesture here. We have to stop.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting to hear
Thanks,
you.
Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.